All right, good afternoon, everyone. All right, so to get us started, I'd like to have our panelists introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. My name is Calli Hartman. I'm the head of customer success at Blackbaud. Our side of the business leverages our CSR platform as well as our workplace culture network powered through EverFi.
Hi, my name is Jamie Walsh. I'm with Anco Insurance. We're a privately held insurance consulting firm here in Texas and help companies with their healthcare strategy and also with employee engagement.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Yetta Toliver. I am the Global Head of Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging for a very old, iconic brand, Xerox. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Hi, everybody. I'm Paula Moore. I'm part of JLL Corporate Real Estate, which I am actually in their consulting arm, and I do workplace experience or employee experience for everybody that is coming back to the office, not coming back to the office, or working hybrid.
All right. Well, thank you each of our panelists for joining us today. Before we dive in, I thought we could do a fun question. Can you each tell me what you like about working in an office or working with the team?
I'll start. So I like working in the office. I'm a father of 4 kids, and my wife's at home too, so I go to the office as fast as possible.
I'm a good mix because I actually have been in a remote space for more than 15 years. I love the energy, though, of being in the office. But when there are certain things I'm working on, I like the quietness of being remote. So I'm a good hybrid.
I'm actually remote, but I get to go to different offices. So if anyone has ever been to Capital One Plaza, it is phenomenal offices. So I've actually seen everything from 1980s buildings now to basically seeing what's out there that's the humanly possible. So I don't love working from home, though. I'm going to tell you that. Like, I'm tired of wearing Lululemon, actually. So I'm really happy to be in a suit today. So.
And I'm fully remote. I had my first daughter during the pandemic, and so I've really loved the ability to be flexible with our schedule, still max out my full time as an executive at Blackbaud, but have that time at home. I do really miss the collaboration in the office, though. That ad hoc, on the spot, let's dig into this and problem solve in person has a little bit more energy than I've found virtually.
All right. So today we are here to discuss a meaningful return to the office space. So for my first question, I'd like to ask the speakers how the transition from remote work for those who are going into the office has been, and for those who are still working remotely.
I'll start. So as an employee benefits consultant, we have an interesting vantage point of what's happening because we work with such a vast array of different companies, different industries. And, it's interesting. I was at the Day One conference in Houston back in February. And I think just since then, which has been, 3 months, the pendulum has, swung dramatically towards employees going back to the office. And, it just depends on the industry, and every company is different. So there's no right or wrong answer. But the companies I've seen be the most successful are really focused more on employee engagement, less on a narrative or a mandate of, hey, it's time to be back at work for these reasons. And so what we focus on when we're working with clients is, what can we do to enhance employee engagement? We see a direct correlation from employee engagement, employee presenteeism, emotional wellness of our employees, and productivity. And obviously, executive leadership's obviously focused on, hey, how do we enhance productivity? And so they try to back into, hey, maybe that means we need to be at the office. But what we try to help clients with, and what we see successful clients do, is, hey, we're really focused on enhancing employee engagement. How can we make our employees feel like they're being heard right now? And how can we help them, and not just them, but also their dependents, their loved ones, their family members, with providing additional resources, because presenteeism at the workplace or lack of presenteeism can be a direct effect of what's going on at home. So if we can support our employees and their family members at a higher level, that actually will enhance employee engagement. And so there's different strategies that we're seeing companies deploy around that. This month is actually Mental Health Awareness Month, which I'm sure every HR leader, people leader in the room is aware of that. But, we're seeing companies actually, instead of just say, hey, we have this, fancy EAP program that's never utilized, they're actually deploying strategies to help employees, help their loved ones, give them additional resources, which is going to, create more productivity at the workplace.
Definitely. I'm sure that creates an environment too where workers do want to return to a physical office as well.
I think that's the goal too, is like, hey, look, we know everyone's been through a lot the past few years. We want to, breathe life into the organization. We don't just want to issue mandates. And so I think that attracts people back to the office. And then obviously creating employee experiences, which we'll talk about, also enhances reasons why employees want to go back to the office as well.
Definitely. So we talked about the return and how during the pandemic, obviously a lot of people were working remote. And as the pandemic started to ease a bit, we started to see more companies welcome back employees to the office. Me personally, I was a remote employee during the pandemic. And I remember when we were asked to go back to the office, not every one of my fellow employees were excited to go back to the office. So besides what you mentioned, what are other ways you can make sure people coming into the office are excited and ready to be there?
Well, if I may join in on that to respond. For us at Xerox, we've kind of taken the approach based on where we need to meet our employees and bringing them back into the office. So we actually went through a period in late summer around June, our CEO passed away, and we had to go through the period of a new CEO coming on board. And what we wanted to do as we were coming out of the pandemic and asking people to come back into the office where it's so deemed necessary to do so, that he did it in the presence of showing up. So he actually went on a leadership tour, and he showed up in about 15 sites. Now, we're in 60 countries, so he had to do this from a global perspective as well, and encouraging them to come back into the office. So that was kind of our approach to do so. Now, we're still trying to figure this out. We actually have certain roles that require our resources to be on site, our employees that support clients for our digital on-site printing services, our technicians that are required to be on site. Where we have call centers, they're required to be on site for the support of those call centers. So we had to figure that out, but to create the energy and bring the presence of our new CEO on site got people back into the office. So that was one way we've done it. Now, currently, we're working on, at the beginning of kicking off Earth Day, now we have a global volunteerism through the end of June. And what we're also trying to do there is encourage employees to come back in together to create these teams to go off and do some volunteering together. So we're really looking in different places to see how we can encourage our employees to get excited about coming into the workspace, but not actually pushing a demand where everybody needs to come back into the workspace. So that's kind of been our approach.
I actually see this from two different perspectives within my role. So Blackbaud moved to remote first experience at the end of 2020, closed all of our satellite offices. We had a Plano headquarters here with 150 employees. That was the majority of the team that I led as well at the time. We kept our Charleston headquarters. So I see this of how do I engage my team locally? How do I make my new remote employees feel included? And the challenges that faces as we can connect more in person and have more of those collaborative in-person sessions. But then I also see this from my role as head of customer success and looking at our customers from 100 of employees to hundreds of thousands of employees and how they're answering the call in different ways. The biggest thing I was excited to see in terms of a purposeful return to office has been how volunteerism has really taken a resurgence. We're seeing a 35% increase in total hours year over year, which is tremendous to see it back at that level. And most of it is in person as well.
All right. Well, this takes me to my next question as well, too. I'm a millennial, and behind me are Gen Zs. If there's anything I know about my generation and the generation after me is that we have our own unique needs and wants. We all want what we want, right? So how do you make sure employees that are coming back to the office feel safe and comfortable to do so, or that they're in an environment where they feel their best?
I lean into education and sharing. So we do a lot of workplace education around discrimination, anti-harassment, but also on anti-bias and belonging and leaning into educating a team that accepts and supports each other and makes everyone show up as their best self. I think that is really critical of meeting our employees where they are, but also learning to meet their peers where they are and support each other as a whole team.
Definitely.
One of the things we've seen too, that in my role as the diversity, inclusion, and belonging leader, we saw a downtick during COVID of the number of sexual harassment cases being filed, discrimination cases being filed, because everybody was in their remote spaces, so there was a lack of that. So that is a bit of concern now as we start moving back into the workplace and ensuring that awareness is there. And we're now looking to ensure, as we go through our compliance training, everyone remembers how important that is in the workplace and how we should treat each other. And also looking through the lens of DEI and B, including equity in that piece, is ensuring that people feel trusted, they feel that they're respected, and especially there's a recent research that I've seen, about 1,000 people that were interviewed, especially women of color, want to make sure they're coming back into the workplace where they're feeling valued, respected, and trusted. So those are important to consider as we start to bring our employees back into the workspace.
All right, so as we talk about feeling comfortable in the workplace, that goes hand in hand with building a culture for your employees. So how do you go about building a culture that is welcoming and inviting to your employees?
I'll take this one. So I was just going to ask in general out there, who in the room is working side by side with their IT and their real estate side? So if you're HR in the middle, who's working or has a team of IT and facilities or real estate that you're working with?
We have quite a few.
Good, a few people. Okay, that's actually what we are explaining to our clients, is that it no longer can be HR's responsibility. It has to be the place, and it has to be the technology, and it has to be the human resource side, which is in the middle. And so this has been the biggest area that I've been out coaching, is how do you get that top layer to actually become a team and become the employee experience or the culture committee? Because it's no longer HR's role to be the event planner, right? To be that place, the people that, has the service awards or whatever. And by the way, my background's in HR, so coming into a real estate company, I could not understand their vernacular. But now the real estate teams are starting to report into HR, and that's why I work for JLL. In a weird way, they needed that kind of knowledge. So that would be an area that I would have you all look at. For if you really want to look at your culture, you're going to have to start with these 3 people becoming one unit, and then actually helping you develop that purpose, and then having drive it around the space and the technology.
All right, so I'd like to take this time to focus on those who are still working with a hybrid model. My question is, for my panelists who are managing teams remotely, what have you done, and how do you keep your employees feeling connected to one another?
I have a weekly win the week meeting at the top of every week where we focus on wins and impact that we've made in the previous week, and really tap into where we've supported our other teams, tapping into purpose as a really purpose-driven company, and focusing on not just the numbers, but what was the impact at the end of the day. That's been really meaningful to pull together those stories. And if we have no other time on that hour-long call, I'd prioritize that above, what are your priorities? What are your blockers? What cascades can I give you? I really lean into sharing the wins and the benefits at the end of the day across the team. And we've extended that through creating a Teams channel where my whole cross-functional team shares all of those stories in one place, because they're distributed, they support different products. In one sense, it's a fairly recent acquisition coming into the fold. And so it's a lot of relationship building and connection building with this dispersed group. And so we've leaned into impact and purpose.
All right.
One key thing, if I can build on that for a second, is what we do. We're in a global space, 60 countries for Xerox. So imagine us trying to put all of our employees under one roof would be a huge challenge, right? So we deal with that, and we know that's the world in which we live in. So what we really try to do to ensure that we have that level of engagement for our culture is putting it out there, especially in what I do in my space, through communication. So that's why I wanted to build on that one. We find these stories about our employees, and and we push out there and we share it as we go through certain different cultures and they're celebrating certain events. We make sure we tell the story. We most recently was certified as an age-friendly company, right? We've been around 116 years. We have a right to be age-friendly when the average service tenure is 23 years, right? We have 5 generations in our workforce. So we actually had an employee that started work with our first CEO in 1964.
Wow.
So he started with Joe Wilson, our first CEO, and our inventor, Chelston Coulson, who invented the xerographic solution. So they were on the call, the CEO is trying to call him to make him feeling, good about hitting his 55 years. It's like, I gotta get off the phone, I gotta go back to work, okay? So when we posted his story out, everybody just thought that was so great. Someone that's been at Xerox for over 55 years, who, oh, by the way, is excited about working remote now because feels like he could work longer because he doesn't have to go into the office. How about that? But having those level of telling the employees stories and sharing out, be it something that they've done as an individual, something that they have done collectively with their family. We had a group that had a presence in Italy with the Pope. One of our disability ERGs are enable_all because it's for all. And that story appeared on our internal board for a week because the Pope, right? So we had to run that story for a long time. But that allows us to really see how our employees are engaged, not just what we do at work, but how we're also engaged in our community.
All right, thank you for that. So now I want to know what tailored or specialized programs that you guys have at each of your companies that help to keep your teams connected and excited about the work that they do day to day.
I'll jump in, and then basically what we're seeing, and I'm not going to talk from JLL because the nice part about being a consultant, I'm with over 25 companies, right? So I'm going to give you the best practices. And the best practice that I got to do last summer was a company did a portfolio savings. So they had about $400,000 that they realized they were going to close some buildings and take that money and reinvest it into their employee experiences. So the fun part was they actually came up with 5 experiences, and one was using the Peloton. So they realized that their group and their employees all had bought Pelotons over COVID, and they had this huge following. And so they bought Pelotons so when they come into the office, they can actually ride with their peers. I personally thought that was phenomenal. I would not want to sweat in front of my coworkers, but I thought that was amazing. So what we're looking at, and what I'm seeing, by the way, from an experience perspective, is that each company's culture is really, if you tailor it for your culture, it's working better. Just saying, oh, this is working at this company and this is working at this company, but it's not really what your employees want, isn't working what I'm seeing, to help out in that space.
All right.
Yeah, I'll add to that. So what I'm seeing in terms of companies being successful is really understanding their people well, allowing their people to be heard. So you mentioned Gen X, the millennials. I just read an article last week in the Wall Street Journal that talked about what Gen X employees want in terms of when they're evaluating their next employer. And I thought it was really interesting. So I'm the old guy on the panel, well, the only guy on the panel, but also the old guy. And so it was good for me to understand from a recruiting perspective and also helping clients, like what college grads who are really the future of our industries, what they're looking for when they evaluate a company. And one is advancement and the ability to personally and professionally develop. And, that can be a little tricky in a hybrid or work for home, role. And so I learned just recently that they're actually looking for employers where there is offices, there are employee experiences, because they want to be around other employees, they want to be able to learn, personally develop. And then the second thing that I thought was fascinating, and I just touched on this earlier, is they're looking for emotional wellness support and solutions. So not just health insurance, but they're actually asking their employer, hey, what do you have around mental health? And we've been in a lot of meetings recently over the last 12 months where we meet with groups of employees in rooms like this. And there will be a Gen X or a millennial ask in front of the entire audience, what's my company doing around mental health? Which my generation, no one would raise their hand and ask that question. So it's super encouraging, but it's also a sign that it's like, okay, I need to be able to understand my employees better. I feel like I understand the people that kind of grew up in the business around my generation, but you're starting to see more senior people say, I want to understand all levels of employees. And then from there, you can make some strategies and try to build upon the culture that is perfect for your company.
I agree. I know that's something that was definitely important for me when I was looking for work, is whether or not I was in an environment where I felt that my bosses cared about my mental health as well. As we move on to the next question, we kind of talked about the type of events that we have, but what sort of virtual events are you hosting for those that are working hybrid or remote? What are you hosting to get people excited about work right now?
We just had a great event a couple of weeks ago here in Plano, where we've identified hotspots of employees all across the country. Again, when we went remote first, we started hiring in locations outside of the areas where we had offices. But that often meant that we had hired a whole team of employees in Chicago across our engineering team and sales and marketing and customer success. And so it's been really exciting to plan virtual meetups or in-person meetups more specifically as well. So our Plano event, we got together about 50 local folks for a day of co-working at a city-owned spot. I'm blanking on the name of it right now, but it was gorgeous, on a nature preserve. And then we also had some connection sessions from other departments to share what their major projects were, what their wins were, the overall structure of their teams, just to knit this local community a little bit more together. Of course, we had a happy hour afterwards where everyone connected as well. But it was great to have that full day that was intentional, that left room for folks to get their day job done, but also loosened up, had some fun and connection.
Okay.
If I can build on that. What we've done is we leverage what I call our cultural champions, our employee resource groups. If anybody knows, Xerox started the Harvard Business Review, gave us credit for starting employee resource groups in the late 60s. And we leverage them. We actually have 10 total in 35 countries, so you can do the math to know how populated we have with our employee resource groups. And they're the ones that can host locally things on site, because they do set up chapter locations for regional and within countries. And they have done certain things as host happy hour events, social events. They've had programming to help with development. They also do a lot of our mentoring to help with that and build stronger networks. One of the things the group in Canada did, they host in St. John and in Toronto. They actually had on-site multicultural days, so people can understand the different cultures, very diverse culture in the St. John area. And they aligned it with a local university that had a lot of international students. They invited them over. And guess what? We use it as an opportunity as a sourcing of talent to come in. So we've just done things like that, not just for our employees, but also to extend an opportunity for those in our communities that represent who we are and what we look like to come in and be a part as well. So we have a strong alliance there that helps our employees to be more engaged.
Okay. I'm curious on which one of you are working on volunteer work at your companies as well, too, and what sort of volunteer work are you asking your teams to participate in?
We definitely are working on volunteer, and especially we got volunteerism going on starting from Earth Day, ending in June. And we have anything from planting trees to going out and serving in a local veterans hospital for our veterans, ERG. We're even to support, because again, we are hybrid as well. And we have some employees, we've got a list of about 25 different virtual events that they can do as well to volunteer, even from writing letters in those that are in hospitals that need attention. So they have things of that nature going on, collecting teddy bears to give to kids that need to have some love and be supported. So those are the different types of volunteerism we do. We even help from a community partnership perspective. We go into robotics to help. We try to make sure where we have underrepresented talent opportunities, we go into those communities and we leverage leaders that look like them to let them know they can have an opportunity in a career at a place such as Xerox. So it not only helps us to volunteer, it helps us to amplify our brand and also use it again as another feeder for future talent.
I think the big thing for me is offering plenty of options for your employees to, again, meet them where they are. So you have your junior associates who may have more time than money to dedicate to your CSR programs. And so leaning in to help with projects that may support them with their mentorship needs or their connection needs in your business. You may also have more senior members of the company that have less time available and may be hybrid, may not be able to jump out. So do you have regular virtual opportunities they can jump into and offer their services to? Volunteering as a group. We have our CSR practitioner will reach out to those hotspots and say, hey, we need to let you know about this event that's happening 3 weeks from now that is close to your location, and encouraging a group of employees to organize from there. And the last thing that I would mention is skills-based volunteering. In terms of the impact those specific volunteer events have, that's more sizable than packing lunch bags, which is still important, still a great use of time, but it really does activate your employee's sense of purpose, especially if you're asking them to come back to the office to leverage those skills and have a longer-term project.
All right, Calli, I love that you brought up paying attention to skills. I think an important thing to consider is whether or not your employees feel fulfilled when they're at work. So you already mentioned it, but how do you guys also leverage employees' purpose and keep them engaged while they're working?
Well, I'll just say, just to add on the volunteering conversation. So I think that there's nothing that feels better than when you're with your teammates at work and you're serving the community, you're volunteering together, you're kind of getting outside of the day-to-day of whatever business you're in. And I feel like it just breaks down walls or divisions that are within the organization, whether it's coming back from work or coming back from a hybrid role all the way back into the office, or whatever's going on within the culture. I feel like that just brings the walls down. Especially if it's something that you're involved in that has threading to what your business is or way that you can help the community. I just think it brings that sense of purpose, employee engagement up to like all new heights. Definitely. So that's a great thing to do if you kind of just feel like your culture is a little tense right now for whatever reason. Put one of those events together. Yeah.
All right. So this brings me to my next question, which is a big question given all of the news on quiet quitting and workplace dissatisfaction. So how do you help employees avoid burnout?
Well, presenteeism and absenteeism is, I think, needs a spotlight around that. I mean, there's employees that are physically showing up to work that are emotionally bankrupt and emotionally absent. And so it's very difficult to monitor that and have a good feel for that when you're in a hybrid or work from home environment. And so I think that's where, as people leaders, we have to really elevate our game and be more strategic about how we check in with people to really see how they're doing. Provide them with really best-in-class benefits for them and their family members. And actually looking to see if there's utilization around those benefits to find out if there's purpose and to see if the communication's been, appropriate and clear to the employees that, where they go in the event that they need help. So, I think, the presenteeism, absenteeism conversation probably needs more attention and more of a spotlight around it.
Okay.
And if I can kind of build on that, we were having a conversation during lunch, and it's around this active listening. And The Art of Active Listening is actually a book that I read by Heather Younger. And it's one of the things I learned to do working with my remotes team over the last 15 years. But it's also important that you do it when you're on site and making sure you are listening to what your employees are saying. And this is something we're working on at Xerox to help our people managers to do a better job. It's not just the how you doing, how's the weather where you are. You start asking the questions, about their family connections, what's really going on, and you got to start listening to that. And those are some keys in there. I learned over the years from the moment of having a remote team, when they signed on and said hello, I can tell if it was a good hello, energy levels high, or it was something's going on. And it may not be the time in that meeting to find out, but I guarantee you I'm calling them after the meeting. What's going on? Is everything okay? Let me know what I need to do to help you along the way. So that's that art of active listening. Sometimes we can lose that skill when we're in person. So you got to look at the person and still listen when you ask them how they're doing, making sure that you're engaging, connecting with them. Sometimes people will put up a wall, even though you may have an opportunity to help them with EAP, but you want to do it in a way that you meeting them where they are and you want to let them know you're there to be with them and support them. So people will only allow you in so far, but you do have to make sure that you're aware, and that's something we're working on with our managers, because our managers have been so focused on driving goals and making sure they achieve those goals. And now they're having to now connect with our people, because our people are so important. And I'm all about, because it's in my space, right? Diversity, inclusion, and belonging. I'm known as Mama Bear at work, because that's the way I am about all 23,000 people in our company. I am Mama Bear over them. And so I want to make sure everyone feels safe and protected. And so we're trying to make sure our managers have the tools to help out with that as well.
Thank you, Yetta. So you mentioned awareness, and I think this is important to anybody running a company right now. But along with burnout, another item top of mind for management, especially those working hybrid or remote, is whether or not employees are actually working. So how can you tell if an employee is doing their job when you're not watching them?
I'll take this one. So that's every CEO that I've been dealing with in the last year and a half is like, my people are not productive. And I said, well, how did you do productivity before the pandemic? And then they don't say anything, right? Nobody actually looked at that before, and now they're trying to do that now. And so now with the mandates that are coming down, by the way, there's a company in Houston that's gone to 5 days a week. They made their managers sign contracts that they would be productive, and if they didn't, they were fired. They were let go. There's another company out of San Antonio that's gone to 3 full days a week, and it's going to go into their performance reviews around their productivity. But my favorite story just came this last week, where a company called to ask me for help, and what happened is they told me that there's a mandate, 4 days a week, but people are coming in and badging in and leaving. So they're like, how do I make people productive? And I'm like, again, I'm going to go back to what is going to be their productivity? What was their target measures before? So I think this one, nobody has figured out. And I don't think we're going to have it figured out, because unless we can start literally, understanding what the productivity means, and this is what I tell people, let's start defining productivity for your organization. And you tell people what to do, and then we actually hold them accountable, great. But you can't just all of a sudden tell somebody, just because you're not here 2 days a week, you're not productive. So this is the big buzzword that your CEOs are literally not sleeping at night over.
Right, and this is kind of along with the same question, but how do you also keep employees emotionally present at work? This is a big one.
Yeah, obviously we don't have the answer key.
If I had it, I'd share it, I promise.
Yeah. But I do think that it kind of goes back to, what your company's purpose is, what the culture is, how you recruit talent, how you set expectations when you're actually recruiting people to join your organization, because you want people to buy in and be all in. Now, with that said, there's still going to be life outside of what's happening at the company. Mm-hmm. I've got elderly parents. I've got 4 kids, 2 teenage daughters. So there's a lot going on after 8 and 5 for my family. And so I think it's just being mindful of that also. Like, people have stuff going on. But at the same time, you want to know if they're emotionally checked out, because you want to be able to provide resources and help for the people. Otherwise, what companies are facing right now, and they just don't understand what's happening, is high turnover. And so they have the turnover, they don't understand why people aren't staying. It could be because people are not bought into your company's purpose.
That's a good point.
If I can build on that for a moment, because thank you for allowing me a little moment to think there, Jamie. Because really what I have found is, again, meeting people exactly where they are and connecting to who they are helps them to stay engaged emotionally. All of my data scientists, except for the directors in India, So you know the time difference, right? When you're working with India. The good news is when you wake up in the morning, most of the things already done that you've given them the day before. But I do love that. But what I found out with my data scientist that supports me on my DIB stuff is he will be on the phone with me at 10 o'clock his night and doing make sure I understand the data and the insights. And I'm going, Anil, it's time for you to be with your family. Anil's daughter will come hang off his shoulder. I'm having conversation with her. And he's like, it's okay, Yetta, because I respect his home. So he's willing to be up on the phone with me at night because he knows that's the start of my day and I need those additional insights to go into the meeting that I'm planning to go to. That happened over time because I respected him for where he was. And he started accepting my 7 a.m. meetings, which is, dinner time for him. And then he started accepting my 9. And he's told me, even on holidays, yet if you need me, I'm here for you. That's because we built that kind of relationship. And that's a part of it. I've stayed with Xerox for 36 years. Because that's the kind of culture we have. It's about family, it's about connecting. So I'm instilling that in with my employees that I work with. I have a program manager, she lives in LA, she's been in office 2 weeks, her entire 2 years of working at Xerox. She recently has a baby. The baby even knows the sound of my voice. But when she gets on, it's like Madison's talking. She wants to be a part of the meetings. Let's make sure Madison sits in her lap so we can have conversation. I guarantee you, anytime I need to connect with her and know what I need my program manager's help, she's there to support me because I'm making her not only feel inclusive, but her entire family. So those are the things, I think the little nuggets that's helped along the way, because that was the same way I was treated when we all came into the office. Something happened in my family, I needed to support. My manager understood. That's the culture we set at Xerox. So, and I think and continue to do that has allowed me to continue to carry on and share that with the employees I work with today.
That's great, Yetta. All right. Well, I'd like to thank each of my panel speakers for joining us today for such thoughtful conversation.